Hey S'mores, I'm Shannon Morse. Welcome to Morse Code. I do tech reviews and tutorials, so if you are looking for in-depth tech and gadget content, you've come to the right place. I've been a fangirl of the OnePlus phones since the days that they were considered the big flagship killer, but they have definitely changed their business model since then, focusing on a premium design, but also upping that cost to be comparable to other flagships. The OnePlus 9 Pro 5G is their newest premium phone. Sorry it's so mirror-like, but say hello to yourself. And this year they have really advertised the fact that they have partnered up with Hasselblad on the camera functionality. So I'm gonna take a close look at the lenses, but also share some of my thoughts on the rest of the phone's features. The OnePlus 9 Pro went on sale April 2nd in Morning Mist, which is this one, or Pine Green. The mist in Morning Mist plays on the actual design aesthetic that you can see here on the back of the phone. It has a misty look to it with this mirror-like finish at the bottom, and then it gradually changes to that opaque silver up at the top. It looks like mist, so I totally understand why they named it so. The 9 Pro is available with either 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage, or 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage, depending on your market. In the US, those are $969 and $1069 respectively. And this phone is 5G capable as well, hence the name. This is a very tall, very skinny phone at 6.7 inches for the display, and it weighs 6.9 ounces. It is skinnier than my iPhone 12 Pro Max, but it's shorter than the S21 Ultra. The back is glass, and it is wrapped in aluminum, which is a step up from the plastic frame of its younger sibling. It is super, super shiny. It grabs your fingerprints no matter where you hold it, so put this thing in the case for sure. The 9 Pro includes the same exact ports and buttons as the 9 and all the previous phones as well from OnePlus. You got Type-C on the bottom, a nano SIM slot, volume rocker, alert slider, and the power button. And you also have dual stereo speakers. There's one at the top and one at the bottom. The display is really impressive, but it does have a kind of nitpicky small fault that I found. See, it gets super bright, but the lowest brightness setting is not the dimmest phone that I have tried. In fact, the OnePlus 9 can get dimmer than this one. So if you are using this at night, or if you intend to, you may find that it is too bright in a dark room, and you may find yourself trying to turn it down lower even though it can't go any lower for the brightness. But it looks great outside, especially on a sunny day. Otherwise, the display is lovely. It's a 3216, which is kind of a strange resolution, by 1440 resolution at 525 pixels per inch. The Quad HD resolution is not set by default, so you have to go into the settings to change it if you want to enable that, but it does top off no matter what resolution at 120 Hertz refresh rate, and it can be dropped down to 60 Hertz if you want to conserve some of that battery. The display is Corning Gorilla Glass, and it is curved at the edges, but it's not very noticeable, and on my review unit, there is a screen protector pre-installed, so you don't have to install one yourself. Very similar to the OnePlus 9, this phone also has a slightly yellow tint to the display, but you can change that in the settings to be a little bit more bluish or more vibrant, just kind of depending on what you prefer. The settings are called advanced color settings in case you want to choose that. I usually go in there almost immediately to kind of mess around with the colors. Now, just like the OnePlus 9 as well, the 9 Pro is also built on top of Android 11, but it's Oxygen OS, which is OnePlus's user interface. It's customizable, it's really easy to use. They have a lot of features that are not included on other Android brands. Also, thanks to Qualcomm's Snapdragon 888, this is a very zippy phone. It quickly responds to all of my gestures, the camera shutter clicks, which sounds very old school. Gaming is super fluid. I used 3D Mark's wildlife test scores, which ranged between 5730 up to 5800, and the stress test hit about 5735. This scores the phone based on graphics performance comparable to mobile games, and it was about the same as the OnePlus 9, which was kind of interesting given that they both have different resolutions. Now, this is a concern. The 9 Pro does run really hot whenever I was stress testing and using the display heavily. And while it's not warm enough here to test overheating outside, like we just had snow on the ground a couple of days ago and it's April when I'm recording this, I don't know, Colorado weather. It's super fun. Some of my peers in the tech YouTuber space have mentioned that it does tend to shut down whenever you use high resolution 4K video recording in a warmer temperature or in direct sunlight. So that is an area of concern, and it is something to think about if you're considering moving to a new Android phone, specifically if you're going to be doing a lot of stress testing or a lot of video recording on it. Moving on to the battery life on this one, just like the OnePlus 9, is very impressive. It packs in a 4,500 milliampere hour battery, and it can last about 11 hours at full resolution, which is about an hour less than what I got on the OnePlus 9, and that's at full brightness with wireless on, playing YouTube videos for the 11 hours straight. Once you do kill this thing after a full day, you can use the fast charging, which is 65 watts, to go from 1 to 100% in 29 minutes. Or the other option is using fast wireless charging, which can get up to 50 watts to go from 1 to 143 minutes, but of course you would need a compatible wireless charger. And if you want to take a look at the new OnePlus wireless charger, I did make a mention to that in my OnePlus 9 review a couple of days ago. Now both Face Unlock and the fingerprint sensor are on this phone as well, and I do prefer the fingerprint unlock because the sensor is very fast, it's very reliable, it is optical in display as far as this sensor goes, so it does light up whenever you place your finger on it, but I did find that it was very fast. I think that covers about everything that I wanted to mention except for the cameras, so let's go ahead and move on to those real quick. All right, it is time for my favorite part of the test, the cameras. Now this is going to be an overview. If you want a super deep dive into the 9 Pro lenses or a comparison with other phones, let me know. But this is gonna give you a good idea of the features without making the video like an hour long, because I could easily talk about these lenses for that long. Now a lot of this is gonna sound similar to my OnePlus 9 review because the lenses are fairly similar with very few important differences to mention. So OnePlus, again, they teamed up with Hasselblad on a 3-year plan to improve the camera functionality. Hasselblad is very well known in the professional camera genre. Now with the 9 series, Hasselblad brings in color calibration. That's the big thing that they were really touting with these phones. The photos are generally very true to life and they are not saturated, just like on the OnePlus 9. I do find whenever shooting on the OnePlus 9 series that the photos are not saturated as they are on my iPhone 12 Pro Max or the S21 Ultra, and I did find that very similar specs happening over on the OnePlus 9. The photos are very pleasing since they are very natural, and the lenses on the back of this one, there's an extra one compared to the OnePlus 9. On here you have a 48 megapixel main camera, that's f1.8 for the aperture with OIS. There's also a 50 megapixel ultra wide f2.2 aperture camera with no OIS, and there's an 8 megapixel telephoto. That's the one you can only find on the 9 Pro, not the 9. That one is an f2.4 aperture, and that one also has optical image stabilization. There's also a 2 megapixel monochrome lens that will help if you want to do black and white photography or low light photos. Now the usual extras are also found in here, like slow-mo, time-lapse. You have nightscapes, you have HDR, portrait mode. The main lens made very detailed shots with crisp lines. I can zoom in and still see the details. It didn't turn into a potato, which is nice. For example, all of these dead leaves in these pictures, they were really crispy and they were well defined, so they looked really good. HDR also did very well in shadowy photos and evened out the contrast. And again, just like on the OnePlus 9, if you look at my friend's black shirt, it's very deep. It's very deep and dark for the blacks, but it doesn't overexpose the rest of the picture, so it looks really nice and natural. On the ultra wide, I did not have any distortion along the edges, which again is something that you can find sometimes with ultra wide lenses. You also have those deep, rich blacks, really nice shadows. There's also a macro feature built in, and that does give you really nice detailed up close shots. There's no additional lens specifically for macro mode. It is implemented into one of these main lenses, but this phone does far better than I think its predecessors from previous generations. Portraits on this one were a lot better than the 9. For example, this stack of rocks looks crisp and it looks detailed and the edges are very well defined and I didn't lose any of that clarity of detail. Same thing with this photo of my husband holding a beer and of this twiggy greenery. All of them were done quite well. I was not impressed with the 30 times digital zoom, and I didn't really expect to be, though it was a lot better than the 10 times zoom on the regular 9 if you compared those side by side. It still appeared like a potato. It did not look very clear. It did not look very detailed or defined. You would probably be happier with the S21 series with the super zoom if you are looking for better telephoto photography on a smartphone, but for what it's worth, optical is always going to be a lot better. Pro mode was supposed to shine in terms of Hasselblad, but without adjusting any of the settings, the photos were overexposed. I lowered the exposure and I messed with the aperture to kind of lower the aperture a little bit, and I was able to get a much better photo out of the pro mode, and it looked a lot more detailed. It looked a lot clearer whenever I was actually messing with the pro mode, instead of just assuming that auto on pro mode would give me what I wanted. It definitely did not. It did a lot better when I was actually using the pro mode like it should be used. You can do videos at 8K 30, 4K at 30 or 60 or 120, which is a step up from the OnePlus 9. You also have 1080p at 30 or 60. On this phone, I got very little wind noise when comparing this side by side with the OnePlus 9. I had clear vocal audio and great stabilization, even when I was walking and tripping over some rocks on this hike, so I was quite happy with it. Here's some default recording on the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro. Bro, what? What are you doing?
Who you fighting, man?
Who
you fighting, man?
Who you fighting? Moving on to the front-facing camera, which is a 16 megapixel. This one is an f2.4 aperture with electronic image stabilization and a fixed focus. This one can also do video at 1080p at 30. I actually was really happy with the selfies on this phone, though I am used to more vibrant coloring, especially with my hair colors. It looks a little bit pink as far as skin tone goes, a little less blue. The portrait mode was about the same as my S21 Ultra, which is very similar to the OnePlus 9 as well. So I was still having that problem with hair strands being kind of blurry. That's generally a thing that I find on a lot of smartphones, but it did a very good general balance of color. Still pretty good portraits, no distortions to be seen, and it did not over sharpen. It's also a fairly narrow selfie camera, so this would be very hard to take group photos on. When using this for video, it did filter out some of the wind noise, but my voice was not dampened. So it was not great, but it still did a general decent job. The stabilization was very good though. So this is a test of the front-facing camera to see how the stabilization is and see how the wind resistance is on these microphones. Let's see how it looks with the bright sun up above me. Let's see how the balance is and the audio. What do y'all think of this front-facing camera? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, last thing I wanted to mention with the OnePlus 9 series is even though I have already had like 4 firmware and software updates to install on this phone since receipt, which was only 2 weeks ago, it oftentimes makes it feel like the phone shipped before it was ready for prime time when you see that many updates to fix bugs and issues that come up. It's tough for me to say that the price point on this phone is justified when it's around $1,000, when you could get similar or sometimes better features for a similar price point. There is no expandable storage for one. The telephoto lens left a lot to be desired, and that's something that not everybody is going to care about, but some will. I still love the fast charging and the great performance on this phone, though I would definitely want to test out other competing phones to make sure that I was still getting the best bang for my buck. Altogether, nothing about the 9 Pro made me think, wow, this phone is amazing. This is my top favorite phone of the year. It's a good phone. It's definitely an option, but the price point makes me go, I would definitely want to look at competitors instead. Is this a phone that you would consider? I'm definitely a OnePlus 9 fan, and I have checked out all of their phones since I think the 1st or 2nd generation, so I've definitely been kind of in that market for a very long time. But this one was just very similar to other ones out there. So nothing really struck me as this is the phone to have. It's an option. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you again so much to my s'mores for subscribing and for watching. I'm Shannon Morris, and I will see you soon. Bye, y'all.